Hi, everybody. Thank you all for joining us for our virtual law day for 2021. Just a few things before we get started with our speaker. I will be posting in the chat and sending an email out afterwards with the link for everybody to get CLE credit if you are needing CLE credit. So you will be able to do that, and I will post that link. And if anybody has any problems, they can shoot me an email or ask in the chat box. Everybody will be muted. So if you have any questions for our speaker, please ask them in the chat function. I will be checking those and asking them throughout the event. Now I will go ahead and turn the meeting over to our speaker, who is Jim Emison. Jim is an attorney. He is originally from Alamo, and he has done a lot of research in civil rights, specifically in Haywood County and other areas of West Tennessee. So I will go ahead and I will stop my screen share. And Jim, the floor is yours. You should have the ability to do everything as a co-host, but if you need me to, if you're finding something that you don't have the ability to do, just let me know and I will get that fixed.
I have not the ability to do any of this. How do I can't see my own face. Can you?
Let's see, at the bottom corner, let me just see if I can fix that for you. At the bottom corner, there should be a video that's or should be a button that says start video on the bottom left-hand corner. Do you see that button?
No, I don't. I see on the left-hand side, I've got a column that says Zoom webinar, and then underneath it, I see your face. Maybe if I click on that, I will, no.
Are you in the full screen mode?
I have no idea. I don't know.
Let's see.
I just typed in my email address and away we went.
Let's see. In the top right-hand corner, do you see kind of the X that says close and then a button beside that? That should say to make it a larger screen. It's a square. It says maximize.
Yeah, I see that.
Okay.
I clicked it.
Okay. Now in the bottom corner,
again. Okay.
Are you in full screen now?
I am.
Okay. Now in the bottom corner, do you see a mute and a stop video or a start video button in the bottom left?
I do not.
That is really odd.
I have a blue button in the lower right with a white icon that says open support chat.
Well, let's just go ahead and get started. Everybody can hear you, and I will look and see if I can find a way to make it start sharing your video. Does that work?
That works for me.
All right, sounds good. I will work away and see if I can find an easier way to do it. But for the meantime, you can go ahead and start talking, and then we'll see what we can do. All right?
I'll do so.
All right, perfect.
All right.
The floor is now yours. Andy. You're welcome.
Thank you, Andy. And for each of you who have joined us today, I apologize for my ineptitude with Zoom and other computer applications, but I'm at the end of my career, not the beginning. And here we go. My screen is changing before me, but what I want to talk about today is how precious the law is and how it has not always been in our American society, in our West Tennessee society, an instrument for achieving justice. And unfortunately, for a long time, it was an instrument of repression and suppression. Let's go back in time to Reconstruction. decade, 1865 to 1875. That's when the real American Revolution took place. And it took place in Congress with a president, Andrew Johnson, who, although he was an ardent unionist, had been a slave owner and an extremely conservative gentleman who was not attuned. Okay, Andy, it says cannot start video.
Let's see. I just sent you a
Please select
request.
another video camera in settings.
So your computer might not have a camera. That might be the problem. So we'll just keep going like this. All right.
Okay,
All
cool.
right.
And that Congress was determined to make the American ideal expressed in the Declaration of Independence, that all men are created equal, a reality in American life. It never had been. Never. But these guys were really determined. And they passed and put out to the states 3 constitutional amendments ending slavery, providing for equal protection and due process, and granting Black male suffrage. But that wasn't all. Those Congresses enacted a comprehensive set of civil rights and voting rights acts for the first time in American history. And they did it over the veto of Andrew Johnson of every piece of that legislation. For the first time in American history, Congress passed legislation over the president's veto. So by 1875, we had a Voting Rights Act that allowed the president, Ulysses Grant, to use the U.S. Army to enforce it. We had civil rights laws that provided for equal access to not only public spaces, but to lodging, transportation, and every aspect of life. As the southern states began to come back into the Union, they didn't send ardent supporters of Black suffrage to Congress. They sent ex-Confederate white supremacists up there. And during the last quarter of the 19th century, Congress began to repeal those civil rights acts, including the Voting Rights Act, and those that the Congresses did not repeal, the U.S. Supreme Court declared unconstitutional. By the end of the first decade of the 20th century, all that remained of that comprehensive set of civil rights laws were 2 statutes that criminalized a conspiracy for the purpose of depriving an American citizen of his constitutional or federally protected rights, or by using force and violence to do that. They were almost never used. The country had lost its ardor for Black suffrage and Black rights. as early as 1877, when the Republican Party chose to barter Black rights to white Democrats in the South for their vote in the House of Representatives for a Republican president, Rutherford B. Hayes. After that trade-off, it was downhill for civil rights for nearly a century. That does not mean that all Black voting ended in 1877. It didn't. In Haywood County, where there was a Black majority, that continued until 1888. And on 3 occasions, Haywood County sent a Black representative, a Black lawyer named Samuel McElwee, to the Tennessee House of Representatives, where he served with distinction. In 1888, the white Democrat ex-Confederates had had enough of Black rule, and they took that election by force, violence, threats, ran Sam McElwee out of Haywood County, and installed a regime basically of the sons of the folks who had enslaved Black people there since the foundation of the county. By 1939, there was a group of educated, middle-class Black people in Haywood County, most of them school teachers, but medical doctor, jewelers, pharmacist, you name it, formed a branch of the NAACP there. They had had enough. They wanted to vote like their right allowed, permitted. And their primary effort was to register Black voters. This did not set well with white Haywood County, who possessed all the political power, most of the economic power, and thought of their Black neighbors as a vast pool of cheap labor. The violence did not start immediately, but the attempt to destroy that branch did. It was organized by a married couple, Ollie and Maddie Bonds, who had met at Lane College. Ollie had been a teacher in the Haywood County system. Maddie still was. He owned a funeral business. They organized that branch. And among the charter members in 1939 was a gentleman named Elbert Williams and his wife, Annie. Elbert was the boiler fireman at the Sunshine Laundry. He made $10 a week. Annie was a presser at that laundry. She made $8. And throughout the Depression years, they lived on that $18 a week in Brownsville. And they were trusted workers. But the most important quality that Elbert Williams possessed was described by Ollie Bond, who helped organize that chapter, as a man who was not easily intimidated. And if you needed one characteristic in Haywood County, Tennessee in 1939 in order to be a member of the NAACP, it was courage. Maddie was fired from her teaching job. Ollie's funeral business was subjected to a boycott. White people spread the word to their Black employees, sharecroppers, maids, porters. If you take a body to Ollie Bond's funeral home, you will be dealt with severely. You will be totally economically locked out. You'll be evicted. And Ollie Bond's business suffered mightily. By the fall, the economic lockout had been upgraded to police harassment, arrests for minor offenses, and brutality. Mildred Bond was 13 years old. She was waiting for her dad to come home one December afternoon in 1939 when the door burst open and two Brownsville policemen brought him in, beaten to a pulp, threw him on the couch, and said to the little girl, "Your daddy probably needs a doctor." And he did. They had beaten him with brass knuckles. And it left a scar on his forehead after he had recovered from the injuries that always reminded him of that beating. But there was worse to come. Ollie's mother had been born a slave, and her mother was a slave. And Ollie's maternal grandfather was the white man who owned his Black grandmother. Ollie's mother was a mixed race lady who had a white brother who was a dentist in Brownsville. And in the frenzy to destroy that branch, a plot had been hatched to murder Ollie and make it look like an accident. They were going to wait till he went to bed on Christmas Eve, torch his house, and burn him alive. Ollie's uncle had a great relationship with his mixed race half sister, and he loved her, and he loved his nephew, Ollie. One of the plotters bragged to him about what was going to happen that night. And I don't know how he did it, but he found a way to get to his sister and tell her, Ollie has to leave town today. There is a plot to kill him. He will be dead if he spends the night in Brownsville. Ollie, acting on his mother's urging, packed a suitcase, left town that afternoon. That night, his home burned to the ground. The branch didn't collapse then. It reorganized. It elected a new president, a preacher who ran a fish market. His name was Buster Walker. They continued to meet, and in the spring of 1940, they were visited by the president of the Jackson NAACP branch, a hero by the name of Milman Mitchell, and another hero, Jackson lawyer, whom I knew well, J. Emmett Ballard. And Lawyer Ballard and Mr. Mitchell urged the members of the Brownsville branch to register to vote. Nobody foresaw how dangerous that was going to be. But in a Black majority county, where if Black people could vote, the white people would be in a minority, and their monopoly on power would soon be over. They just were not ready to give that up. On May the 6th, 1940, another charter member of the Brownsville branch, Elisha Davis, and Buster Walker led a group of 5 men to the courthouse to register to vote. They went to the wrong office. They went to the registrar's office. Why wouldn't you? Well, that was for deeds and conveyances and mortgages and documents that affected the title of real estate or personal property, not voting. And they couldn't have registered that day anyway, because in Tennessee in 1940, registration to vote was very difficult. It was limited to 2 weeks in August and then 3 days in October. It was hard for working people to get registered. But these men said they're coming back. We're coming back in August when the books open, and we're going to register and we're going to vote. The white lords, rulers, politically powerful men of Haywood County weren't going to permit that. And the threats against the would-be registrants began the very next day, May the 7th. The, quote, boys at the courthouse sent a hanger on from the Whittler's bench outside to deliver a message to Elisha Davis and to Buster Walker. The boys at the courthouse say there's going to be trouble if you keep this up, and that if you do, they're going to run you out of town. The threats escalated to violence, and the messengers that delivered them escalated in power and social standing. Businessmen, deputy sheriffs, members of the city council, former Brownsville police chiefs, all delivered the message: we are not going to allow you to vote, period. But these men were determined, and the threats did not dissuade them. They continued to say, we're going to return to vote. Well, the white people with the power decided our efforts to dissuade these men are going to be unsuccessful. So we need another plan. And the plan was to cut the head off the snake. We will get these leaders out of town. We'll run them out of the county. And that NAACP branch will collapse leaderless into the dust, and we won't have to worry about Black voting. So in the middle of June 1940, actually June the 15th, a Saturday, and then in the wee hours of June 16th, which was Father's Day, a white mob was formed, and they first went after Buster Walker, president of the branch. He actually saw the mob coming and escaped. He was hidden by a black couple who owned and operated a restaurant in the African American section of Brownsville. A friend, after the mob gave up looking for him, spirited him out of the county in the back seat of his car, and Buster Walker went on to Philadelphia to deliver the message of what was happening in Brownsville to the 1940 NAACP National Convention. Elisha Davis, the other leader of the 5 would-be voters, was not as lucky. At about 1 a.m. Sunday morning, a pounding occurred on his front door. He and his wife went to the door, and there stood 2 Brownsville policemen in full uniform. And on the road in front of their house were 5 or 6 automobiles. They knew the policeman. One was Tip Hunter, a former Haywood County sheriff, and to be sheriff again pretty quick. And the other was policeman Charles Reed. They ordered Elisha Davis to put on his clothes and come with them. They had no warrant. Elisha Davis had committed no crime. They had no authority to pick him up for any reason. It was a kidnapping, pure and simple. As they took him away, Elisha's wife pleaded with his captors not to hurt him. And one of them told her, "We are going to kill him, and you'll never see this black son of a bitch alive again." They had 7 children and another on the way. The mob drove away, and the tail lights disappeared into the dark. And they took Elisha Davis, and they had picked up another fella by mistake. His name was Jack Adams. They thought he was Buster Walker. They took those 2 men to the Hatchie River bottom, about 6 miles south of Brownsville. They went deep into the swamp. They surrounded them, and then they told them, "We intend to kill you, and the only way you can avoid that is to tell us who is in that Brownsville branch of the NAACP and what their intentions are." At that point, one of the members of the mob recognized Jack Adams, and they said, "Hey, this isn't Buster Walker. This is a guy named Jack Adams. He works at Federal Compress in Brownsville. He's not in that NAACP, I'm sure." They let him go. They surrounded Elisha Davis. Elisha Davis gave them the names of several members and told them, the purpose is to vote. The plot to kidnap Davis and Walker was known by very powerful men at the head of society in Brownsville and politics. One was a magistrate who was a director of the Bank of Brownsville. His name was T.A. Freeman. Elisha had worked for him when Elisha was a young man. The other was D.D. Shaw, vice president of the Brownsville Bank, whose nephew was a Brownsville policeman, Hot McLeish. Both of those men knew about the kidnapping in time to get their message to the kidnappers. Hot McLeish delivered his uncle D.D. Shaw's admonition: get him out of town, but don't lay a hand on him. And T.A. Freeman's message was delivered, don't know by whom, but it was the same. Get him out of town. Do not hurt him. That mob told Elisha Davis in the swamp, get out of here. If you ever come back to this county, we'll kill you. And they meant every word of it. He left. He went to Jackson. He went to Alamo, my hometown, to the home of Dr. L.D. Thomas, who lived in Alamo, but practiced medicine. He was an M.D. in Brownsville. Dr. Thomas called Milman Mitchell, president of the Jackson branch. Mitchell came and got Elisha Davis, took him to Jackson, hid him out with friends. For a few days after Elisha Davis and Buster Walker were forced out of town, the white people who were perpetrating these crimes probably thought they were successful, but they hadn't counted on Elbert Williams. And he lived up to Ollie Bond's judgment of his character. And on Thursday, June the 20th, the last day of his life, he decided that the NAACP branch had to have a leader, that the Black people of Haywood County had to have a vote, and that he would step into the breach. When he got off work, he went to the Capitol Theater in Brownsville, where Elisha Davis's brother, Tommy, who was also a charter member of the NAACP, worked as the custodian. And in a conversation that both Elbert Williams and Thomas Davis thought was private, Elbert Williams gave Thomas Davis his plan for continuing to meet and continuing to register to vote come August. That conversation was overheard by a white man. And as a white person in Brownsville during that period of time would do, that conversation was reported to the Brownsville police, who had conducted Elisha Davis's kidnapping. So that night, the white folks had known that the efforts to dissuade failed. The effort to cut the head off the snake had not worked. And they could not permit this man, Elbert Williams, to reunify that branch and continue the effort to vote. So a drastic measure was needed. And that was they needed a horrific murder, a horrible death that was so awful it would be seared permanently into the consciousness of every Black person in Haywood County, Tennessee. And the message burned into those brains would be, if you try to vote, this is what will happen to you. So that night, June 20, 1940, Tip Hunter and Charles Reed set out on another errand. They had no arrest warrants. They had no search warrants. They had no probable cause. They had no suspicion even that a crime had been committed, much less that either Thomas Davis or Elbert Williams had participated in a crime. Their crime was wanting to vote like a real American. The policeman first went to the home of Thomas Davis, picked him up. Then they went to Elbert Williams' home and got him. Elbert's wife begged him to let Elbert dress. He was in his PJs and a tank top, and they wouldn't allow it. He was barefoot. Took him. They locked those men up in the city lockup, and they questioned them about the NAACP, what they were going to do. And after an hour or so, they let Thomas Davis go. And Thomas Davis, in an affidavit to the Department of Justice, said that when he left the city lockup, there was a big crowd of white men in the lobby and outside, and that he was extremely frightened that they were going to do him harm. But for some reason, they didn't appear interested in him. And he walked to the corner, turned the corner out of sight of that group, ran to his home, put on a jacket, went to Jackson, and never returned. Elbert Williams was not that lucky. He was the one they wanted. He was kept in the jail for a while. We don't know whether Tip Hunter unlocked the doors and turned him over to the mob or accompanied the mob. But we do know that Annie Williams, Elbert's wife, tried to take him some shoes and clothes to the jail to wear. And when she got there, Charles Reed was the only person in the jail. And he had been one of the men she had seen take her husband away from their home just hours earlier. And she said, I want to give these clothes to my husband. Who is he? He is Elbert Williams. I don't know Elbert Williams. He hasn't been here tonight. There's nobody here. Tip Hunter and Elbert and all the white men Thomas Davis saw outside were gone. Elbert didn't come home that night, didn't show up to work at the laundry the next day where he'd worked for nearly 10 years. building the fire for the boiler so that the laundry machinery would run. His wife was frantic. She went everywhere she knew to go, trying to find him. She sought the help from their employer. He sent her to his father, who was the postmaster. And when she told Postmaster Dupree the story about wanting to find Albert to get his clothes to him, she is quoted by a reporter as having said, "He told me maybe he doesn't need any clothes." She went to the Haywood County Sheriff, Richard Cleveland Hawkins. "Sheriff Hawkins, help me find my husband. He didn't come home last night. He didn't come home Friday night. He hasn't been at work. Those men took him out of our home." "Oh, Ms. Williams, don't worry. Those boys are not going to hurt your husband. They just want to ask him a few questions. If he's not home in a day or two, come back and I'll help you find him." No help from the sheriff. There was no help from the law for Black people in Brownsville. They needed protection from the law. The law was not an instrument of justice. It was an instrument of repression and suppression, and there was no escaping it. There was no protection for a Black person in Haywood County. And the law propped up the white supremacist regime, and the law enforcement officers were the enforcers of white supremacy, without whom it would fall on its face. White supremacy only existed because white people used terror to support it. And without that terror, it was toast. For 2 days, Ms. Williams searched for her husband, not to find him. And on Sunday morning, early, a knock came on her door around 7 a.m. She found the employee of the Black undertaker there. And he delivered a terrible message that she must have known was coming. "Ms. Williams, they want you to come to the river. They found a body." So she went, and Albert's father went, and there on the bank of the Hatchie River on Sunday morning was his bloated, hideous corpse that was the exact media the white supremacist terrorists wanted to convey their message about what happens to Black voters. There he lay. Albert's dad and his widow identified him. They said his head was about double the normal size and was beaten. Annie Williams said there were 2 bullet holes in his chest that looked like there were 2 holes in his chest that looked to her like bullet holes. The coroner wrote out a summons. The sheriff brought 6 white men to the riverbank that Sunday morning to act as the inquest jury. and the coroner held a summary inquest. There's no record that a single witness testified, not even Ms. Williams. There was no autopsy sought. There was no medical examination that the coroner had the authority to compel. He could have summoned a medical doctor to the scene to examine the corpse and testify about the cause of death. He chose not to do that. He was not a doctor, he was an undertaker. The jury that had lots of family, business, and political connections to members of the Elisha Davis kidnap mob quickly found that the cause of death was unknown at the hands of parties unknown, but it was done by foul means. The coroner ordered an immediate burial of the body. The coroner was Tip Hunter's brother-in-law. The body of Albert Williams was put in the back of a pickup truck taken to Rawls Funeral Home. A grave was dug in Taylor Cemetery, and before the sun set on Sunday, Albert Williams' body was in a pine box, buried 6 feet under Haywood County soil, out of sight, and hopefully for white people, out of mind. Buster Walker told his story to the NAACP convention, and Thurgood Marshall set up an appointment for him to meet with the top lawyers in the Department of Justice Criminal Division Civil Liberties Unit, 1 year old. His story was convincing enough that those Department of Justice lawyers, for the first time in the 20th century, ordered an FBI investigation into the murder of Albert Williams. They thought it was a crime under the 2 fragments of the civil rights laws that had survived from 1875. They thought there was a conspiracy and a murder of Albert Williams to keep Black people and him from exercising their right to vote. And on June 25, a reluctant FBI showed up in Brownsville. They had no more intent of conducting a true investigation into this crime than anything. They did not request an autopsy. Albert had only been buried for a little over 36 hours. They never exhumed his corpse. They had no interest in finding out whether there were bullets in his chest or whose gun had fired them. They had no interest in determining for certain the cause of his death and made no effort to do so. They did not establish a crime scene. They gathered no forensic evidence. They took no photographs. They made no arrests. They conducted no searches. And their investigation was amounted to a series of interviews of people, white or Black, that basically said, well, what do you know about the murder of Albert Williams? Nothing, didn't know him, never heard of him. Thank you very much. They go back to Memphis, they'd write up their report. That's what they sent to the FBI in Washington. Well, Thurgood Marshall got affidavits from Elisha Davis, Thomas Davis, Annie Williams, Buster Walker, and forwarded those all to the Department of Justice. And in March of 1941, 9 months after the murder, the head of the criminal division of the United States Department of Justice wrote the U.S. attorney in Memphis and told him that the department had carefully examined the evidence, that it was undoubtedly a violation of those civil rights criminal statutes, and asked the U.S. attorney in Memphis to impanel a grand jury and indict Tip Hunter, who was the FBI's chief suspect, and about 19 other named individuals. U.S. attorney in Memphis does nothing. He wasn't about to indict anybody in Brownsville. October of 1940, 6 months later, and no action, the head of the criminal division, the number 2 lawyer in the Justice Department, writes the U.S. attorney in Memphis again and says, I paraphrase, indict them now. And if you disagree with me, request a face-to-face meeting and we will discuss it and resolve our differences. The U.S. attorney requested the meeting. His request was granted. His request to fly to Washington rather than take the train was granted. And there, the Department of Justice file has a big void for 6 weeks from October 11 to mid-December. And in mid-December, without any explanation, the head of the criminal division writes to the attorney general, and this is the same man who had twice ordered the U.S. attorney in Memphis to indict, says to the attorney general, we need to close this case file. The evidence is insufficient. No explanation of his change of heart was offered. None appears in the record. We don't know whether the meeting took place. If it did, there's not a note about it. But in 6 weeks, the person who had ordered the indictments was now suggesting to the attorney general that the case should be closed. During that period of silence by the Department of Justice, Thurgood Marshall himself had traveled to Brownsville to try to gather more evidence. He found out who had been kidnapped with Elisha Davis, and he tracked Jack Adams down in Chicago. He talked to him. For some reason, Thurgood Marshall did not get a written statement from Jack Adams. He did not get an affidavit from Jack Adams. And Jack Adams basically gave him a pot of gold that he didn't recognize. Jack Adams told Thurgood Marshall that I didn't know any of those white men. I don't know who they were. I didn't know a single one of them. But he knew they had kidnapped him off the street. He knew they had taken him to Elisha Davis's home. He knew that Elisha had been kidnapped. He knew that they had both been forced into the swamp and surrounded and threatened with death. And he could have corroborated Elisha Davis's testimony on every one of those points. For some reason, Thurgood Marshall, the greatest civil rights lawyer ever lived, and who was a human dynamo doing the work of at least one, maybe more law firms, didn't recognize the golden nugget that he had, and only told the Department of Justice all I could come up with was Jack Adams, and he didn't recognize any of those men. So on January 23rd, 1942, Attorney General Francis Biddle closed the file on Elbert Williams' murder. And on January 25th, 2 days later, in Sikeston, Missouri, the good white people of that town tied Cleo Wright to the bumper of a pickup truck, dragged him through town, dragged him to the main intersection of the black section of town, doused him in gasoline, and burned him. We were at war by then, had been for about 6 weeks since Pearl Harbor. And within 48 hours, the Japanese were broadcasting throughout Southeast Asia. Colored peoples of Asia, if the Allies win the war, this is the treatment you can expect to receive at their hands. And then recounted the horrific death of Cleo Wright. Thurgood Marshall tried for years to get the Department of Justice to reopen this case of Elbert Williams' murder. They just wouldn't do it. And he was so critical, Thurgood Marshall was, of the FBI's performance in public speaking and in writing, that lost my train of thought with that crash. Thurgood Marshall was so critical that in 1947, J. Edgar Hoover directed one of his top FBI executives to conduct an internal investigation of the investigation into the death of Elbert Williams. And the results of that internal investigation were that the investigation of the death was substandard, that leads were not followed, that witnesses whose testimony was critical and might have altered the results of the FBI's recommendation were not interviewed. Hoover wrote on the report, this investigation received poor supervision in the field and at the seat of government, FBI headquarters. Then he put that internal investigation with the rest of the FBI record of the case and put it in file 13, deep 60. Nobody ever determined the cause of Elbert Williams' death. Annie, his wife, says she thought there were bullets in his chest. If they were, they might still be in his grave. I petitioned the United States Attorney Edward Stanton Jr., an African-American gentleman, Obama appointee to reopen the investigation. He recognized that Albert Williams was indeed a civil rights hero. He had a meeting with the families of Albert Williams and Elisha Davis and told them how wonderful their ancestors were, but he did not reopen the investigation. I asked the U.S. Department of Justice Civil Rights Division to reopen the investigation. They did the same thing. No, thanks. Our district attorney in the 28th Judicial District, Gary Brown, on August the 18th, I believe, 2018, reopened that murder investigation, took the leads and information that I had developed in my investigation and asked the TBI to send an agent to Brownsville. They did. The trail was too cold for this agent. He was unable to determine anything really other than what I had told them. And Albert's grave, still there, unmarked, location unknown, in Taylor Cemetery. And I'm working with University of Tennessee Forensic Anthropology Department and a gentleman in Lakewood, Colorado, named Clark Davenport, who is an engineer and has a firm called Geoforensics International. They find graves for the FBI and the Department of Justice and others. And we're working, trying to determine what would be a likely location of Albert's grave. We did a ground penetrating radar survey out there, thought we had some good leads. Before we could get the case reopened, the engineer who had done the survey had changed computers. He'd lost his data. He tried to reconstruct it. It didn't work. We dug in the wrong place. Found one grave, but it was of a different era. So we still don't know where Albert Williams is. There's a lady in Brownsville who claims to have a photograph of his grave. And I hope she's looking for that. And that may be our last best hope. I'm dedicated to getting whatever justice for Albert Williams we can get at this point. The Department of Justice and the U.S. Attorney in Memphis offered little slivers of justice. Gary Brown courageously attempted justice. We want to find his grave. We want to permanently mark it as befitting a civil rights hero. I have completed a manuscript of the story that has a working title called Albert Williams, First to Die, and the Failure of American Justice. I'm working with an editor on that right now. There's the possibility of a documentary film. I've signed a contract for that. We haven't yet found a financier. The NAACP National Convention enacted a resolution recognizing Elisha Davis and Buster Walker and Albert Williams as civil rights heroes. In 1963, at the funeral of Medgar Evers in Jackson, Mississippi, Roy Wilkins, the secretary of the NAACP, recognized Elbert Williams when he said that we in the movement in 1960 think we're the first, but there were pioneer fighters for civil rights. He named a couple of people, and he said, and Elbert Williams, who was lynched in Brownsville, Tennessee in 1940. Roy Wilkins was there and remembered it. We also formed a committee in Brownsville, chaired by John Ashworth, wonderful guy. And in 2015, on the 75th anniversary of the murder, we held on June 20 at the Haywood High School a memorial service that was attended by over 600 people. Elbert had never had one. Cornell Brooks, who at that time was the president of the National NAACP, was the keynote speaker. And it was attended by whites and blacks, and finally gave Elbert the memorial service he so richly deserved for so long. The holy grail for me would be to find Elbert's grave, to find the bullets in the grave, and to have them ballistics tested against Tip Hunter's firearm, which is in the possession of his daughter, or at least it was when I interviewed her. And all of those elements may be the best we can do for justice for Elbert today. But I'm going to keep on looking for that grave and hope that we will be able to do even better. Our legacy as Southerners, and mine as a white Southerner, is to try to bring a measure of justice to Elbert Williams that should have been brought in 1940 and 1941 by a prosecution of the perpetrators of that murder. And I've often wondered if they had done what the head of the criminal division of the U.S. Justice Department said: indict these men, prosecute them. Would that have prevented any of the slaughters of voting rights activists that occurred in the 1960s? If the Department of Justice had shown white supremacist terrorists that they meant business in 1940 and prosecuted them, would that have deterred any of the violence in the 60s? We'll never know. Now, that's the end of my little story about Elbert Williams, at least for now. And I'll be happy to take any questions that you have and give them my best shot.
Hey, Jim, we've got a few questions in the chat, so I'm going to start at the top. The first one is wanting to know if any of Elbert Williams' children are still alive and if they are in Haywood County still.
He was childless. His wife, his widow, immigrated to New York State. She remarried, and she has an adopted son who lives in Georgia. Elbert Williams had no children. Elbert Williams has two nieces by his sister Ruby, who live in Ohio. He has a great, great niece through his sister, Julia, who lives in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And she has donated her DNA. She is a descendant through an unbroken female line from Elbert's sister, and therefore will have the same mitochondrial DNA that he has. And if we think we've got Elbert, the DNA match will tell us for sure yes or no.
All right, we've got another two-part question. So I'll ask you the
Sure.
first part. How frequently did these types of white supremacist crimes occur, and what pointers do you have for others looking to unearth these stories?
The murder of Elbert Williams was the first murder in the nation of an NAACP member motivated to end that person's civil rights work. It was one of thousands of racially motivated murders in the period 1875 to 1965. Thousands. The Equal Justice Initiative has identified over 4,000, and that's probably just the tip of the iceberg. Now, they all weren't voting rights murders. Many of them were murders of Black men who were accused of raping a white woman. But Elbert Williams was not. He was killed because he wanted to vote, which to me makes the crime more heinous. Now, Andy, was the next part of that question, how did I come upon this?
So that is one question that's in the chat, but the next part of that one was, what pointers do you have for others who want to unearth these stories?
There are several that will be worked on by the Tennesseans for Historical Justice. Go to their website, take a look at that. You can contact me if you really want to work on one in a West Tennessee county, and I might be able to direct you. Houston Gordon is working on one at the current time that occurred in Covington. But there are hundreds of these in Tennessee, hundreds of them. In 1918, a Black man was burned alive at the stake in Dyersburg after a kangaroo trial by the mob that burned him in the circuit courtroom in the Dyer County Courthouse. They subpoenaed witnesses, one of whom was the Dyer County Sheriff. The issue the jury was to decide, do we hang him or do we burn him? The jury was chosen, of course, from the mob. The prosecutor was, the judge was. The jury didn't take long. They came back with a verdict. We burn him. Those people drove a buggy axle into a vacant lot adjacent to Court Square, chained this man to it, and while about 5,000 people watched, they burned him alive. So that is the depth of the crimes we're talking about that have left such scars. If somebody wants to go do the research in Dyersburg on that one, I can give you a heads up and point you to some newspaper articles. And I've often wondered, I've never gone to look myself. I've often wondered if there are minutes in the circuit court minute books about it. But they're everywhere. Madison County, Crockett County, Haywood County, Henderson County, all over. West Tennessee has a very lawless, violent past.
All right, the next question we've got is, how did you first hear about this story and what made you interested in doing further research on it?
I stumbled upon it on the internet, researching a United States Supreme Court decision in United States versus Harris that arose out of a gunfight in Alamo, Tennessee in the 1870s. I'm still working on that. And I ran across an article from Wayne State University. And I'll have to paraphrase, 2 Depression era lynchings in West Tennessee. One was about a man by the name of Albert Gooden in Covington, and the other was Albert Williams. The essay about Albert Williams was maybe a page and a half. And I thought, my God, that's 20 miles from where I'm sitting right now in Alamo. And it occurred only 3 years before I was born. My grandfather was a judge. My uncle was a lawyer. My dad was a lawyer. I heard lots of war stories, but I didn't hear this one. So I wanted to talk to somebody I thought would know something about it and could give me more information. So I called my friend Mike Cody, who was a lawyer in Memphis in the Birch Porter Johnson law firm, who had helped represent Dr. King during the garbage strike in Memphis in 1968. And Mike had a distinguished career, was later a Tennessee Attorney General, U.S. Attorney in Memphis. And I thought, if there's one guy who'll know about this, it's Mike Cody. So I called him and told him the story. And he said, Jim, I've never heard of that. Never heard that. So I decided to call someone, or am I still there? Mike, Andy?
Yeah, you're still here.
Okay, my screen changed. I called Army Bailey, Judge Bailey, the late Judge Bailey, African American civil rights activist all his life, helped form the National Civil Rights Museum. And whoever asked this question, it was how he answered me, not what he said. He said essentially the same thing Michael Cody did, but he said it like this: Jim, I've never heard any of that. And that is what motivated me to go to work on it. And I've now been working on it for 10 years.
Oh,
So that's how it started.
those are all the questions I've got. Oh, let's see.
Okay.
Got to thank you.
Well, thank
So
you for the opportunity.
yeah, thank you so much for being here. If anybody has any last minute questions, throw them in the chat box really quick. Um, we'll give that about a minute for anybody to submit any
Sure.
last questions. Um,
Sure.
but thank you
I'll,
so
I'll,
much.
I'll throw this while the minute is passing. I see that.
Let's see, somebody wants.
My email is very simple. It's jimemison@gmail.com. It's all lowercase, JIMEMISON@gmail.com. I was about to say that Thurgood Marshall said first thing he did when he went to Brownsville was go to the courthouse and eyeball Tip Hunter. And I've always had a picture of that scene in my mind. Thank you, Julia.
Well, all right. If nobody has any more questions, right before we end for the day, I wanted to announce our annual Pro Bono Awards for the people at our office who have done the most pro bono and reduced fee service for West Tennessee Legal Services this year. And those are Mary Jo Middlebrooks and Angela Mueller, who have won those awards. And I'll be getting those awards out since we're not able to give those out in person this year. But let me pull the chat box up just to make sure we don't have any last minute questions. But just a quick reminder to, if you would like to get CLE credit, to fill out the form, and I will be sending that out in an email, but it's also in the chat box for everyone. And then if there are no further questions, Jim, do you have any last remarks to say before we end the meeting?
Well, thank each and every one of you for listening. And if any of you have an opportunity and want this story to be told to another group at another time, all you have to do is ask.
Great. Thank you, Jim, so much. And thank you, everyone, for being here. And if y'all ever need anything from me, always feel to reach out. But I will go ahead and end the meeting. Thanks, Jim.
Thank you, Andy. Good
All right,
night.
y'all. Have a good day.
You too.